topic for this morning is, what do you do when you've written a story where you've created this world and you have these characters, and your readers read it, they fall in love with your characters, they fall in love with your story, which that's a wonderful thing, of course.
Nice.
But then they come back to you and they say, well, can you lengthen the story? Can you lengthen the novel? Is there a part 2 coming? And so how do you approach this?
Well, in Second Chances, a book of choices, there was always a plan to have 3 books.
Okay, so it's always going to be a trilogy.
It was always going to be a trilogy, and right now the 2 of them are out.
Okay.
The third one is still stewing in my brain. Magic House also was always going to be a trilogy.
Right.
And I'm working on the second one of those. Strewn Shoes, they want more from Serena. And I've had the people that have read it say, well, what's next? What does she do next? What's coming?
Right.
And, well, guys, was the end. I mean, it's really a compliment to, to have them read it all the way through and be so excited that they want a second,
right,
or another episode,
right,
so to speak. But I've kind of moved on from that one, and unless something brilliant happens in Serena's life in my head, I just try to explain to them that was the end. I don't see that there's much more you could do with her, unless you turned it into a TV series or something.
Right. Well, and I face the same thing with my stories, both Ghostlight and Treacherous. I found that people that have read it, they're like, okay, what happens next? What happens next? There's got to be more than this. But particularly the case of Ghostlight, and so once that story is told, there's really no room to even expand that or go any further. That it's a quick window into these people's lives, and this event that's happened.
Exactly.
And once it's told, and I guess I could go back, and there's always the risk, I guess, as an author of, well, let's go ahead and lengthen this, and so you look for places where you can put in more background or more backstory or more one thing and another. But it's the question I guess you come up with is what I'm doing, is it adding more to the story, or am I just gilding the lily, so to speak? So
I've always found, though, in everything I've read and everybody I've listened to, leave your readers wanting more.
Right. And so it is really a nice compliment.
Yes, it is. It's a really nice compliment. I don't think you want to, I think there's a fine line there, though. You don't want to leave them with so many questions that they don't want to pick up the next book because there's not enough answers.
Right.
But you want to leave them with the idea that what their fantasy does with the character afterwards is good.
And I guess there's something to be said for leaving something open-ended enough that if you wanted to write a sequel or wanted to continue to expand sort of like a part 2 or that kind of thing, that there's still room to do that. For instance, with my story Treacherous, I probably could put in a part 2. I'm kind of turning it over in my head at the moment. Excuse me, but I've not really come up with anything definitive. With Ghostlight, that story is told. It's done.
Yeah.
There's no
going back with Ghostlight.
Right. And I guess a story is finished when you can neither add nor subtract anything from it. It's like painting. You look at a painting and go, well, I could add this or this, or I could take away this and this, but it's not going to add anything more to the painting.
Yeah, it's not going to complete the story.
Right.
When you write the trilogies, I'm finding that I repeat myself.
Right.
And it's something I need to research. When you write the second one, do you need to write enough about what was in the first one so that it can stand alone?
Right.
And do you do that again in the third one? Or do you just pick up and keep moving forward? Where do you draw that line?
Yeah, I don't know if you start with a prologue, just kind of a brief summary of what's come
Before?
previously, or what you do.
Yeah.
So there are other, I guess the most famous example would be like Lord of the Rings.
Uh-huh.
That whole the Hobbit, Lord of the
Yeah.
Rings, and the Fellowship of the Ring, I guess, is the last one. But and I'm not sure how he's tied all of those three together. I don't know enough about it. I don't really care for Tolkien very much. So.
Well, I've read a lot. Like I've read J.K. Rowling Harry Potter series,
Right.
And she goes back and forth, and she tells a little bit of history in each one of the books, but she doesn't spend a lot of time.
Right.
Same thing with Stephanie Meyer in the Twilight series.
Mm-hmm.
She goes in and she tells a little bit of the history from the book before, but she doesn't spend a lot of time.
Right.
So each book stands alone.
Right.
Each book has a conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And in my view, it's difficult to do. I know in Second Chance's trilogy, I left the second one hanging.
Right.
Kind of a cliffhanger. I wish I hadn't done that now.
Right. Well,
because that kind of sent me in one direction, a place where I have to begin.
Well, it feels like almost like a funnel, because you start out with your story is such broad focus, right? And as you go into the second novel, then that focus is you've got your characters already set, you've got your scenes already pretty well set, and so that gets a little smaller. By the time you get to the third, or if you do like say a series of 4 novels or 5 novels, that funnel gets smaller and smaller to where it's pretty focused on you're almost,
right.
You're almost locked in.
Right. And I remember when I read the Hunger Games, you got a lot of backstory in each one of those books.
Right.
So,
and then you run the risk too of having using flashbacks so much. And yeah, your character goes, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great compliment to have people wanting more, but I still believe there's a very fine line on adding more, subtracting, writing a sequel, whatever it is you're going to do. I think the first one is always your best. Even in the movies, when you go to the movies, the first movie you see is always the best, and the sequel is not.
Yeah, you kind of go.
Well, because all the excitement's revealed.
Right, and you think, well, gosh, did they really need to make a part 2 of this?
Yeah, exactly. So it can get complicated.
Right. And like I mentioned before in our last podcast, I've got like one version, the complete version that I first wrote of Treacherous, and then I went back and started fiddling with it and trying to lengthen it and adding more complexity to it. And yeah, I probably could do that, but I think it takes some of the punch out of the story.
It does.
So.
It does. And it waters it down a little bit.
Yeah, I want to,
and that's a story that needs punch.
Right.
Because it's kind of macabre, and you need to be shocked.
Right. And I know that like a lot of times, like the diagram looks like almost a sine wave, where you have tension rising, then you have a small conflict, then you come back from that, and then. But you have a constantly rising tension, and then until finally you get to the climax of the book, and then it drops off. But with a short story, you don't really have a lot of time for. It's like making a quick sketch in a sketch pad. You've got time to sketch in your characters real quick, give enough of a background on them so that people begin to they can connect with them, and then you tell your story. But it's usually rising tension, one climax, and then the epilogue, and you're done. So whereas a novel is more of a stair step,
right?
From what I understand, because I've never written a novel, I don't know.
Well, when I write my novel, like I said before, I try to have some action on every fourth or fifth page. But it's all trying to build to the main climax of the story.
Right.
And usually that's about 2/3, 3/4 of the way through before you hit that point.
Right.
So you have all these little things going on in your story.
It's like that old rule that if in the first act of a play, if you introduce a gun, by the third act, I think that gun had better fire.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Exactly.
So
I had somebody tell me too that you kind of break up a book as in thirds.
Right.
And so it's the same idea. You got to build, each third till you get to the
the climax of, the whole story where everything kind of culminates.
And then where do you fit in to stretch it? Once you've had that general model, that plan, that sketch, whatever you want to call it, to go back in and try to stretch or to lengthen whatever you're trying to do, you mess up those thirds.
Well, but there's something also that I really like that I love about the editing process, because if I've had, like, I'll write the story and I've got these things happening over here, then I can go back and I can add a little bit of foreshadowing. I can add in things that kind of that give it a little more continuity. So you can kind of do that. You can go back and kind of maybe like seasoning a soup. You can go back and go, oh, I can put this in here and I can put this in here.
As long as that's what you do to the story, you just add your seasoning to it. But if you go in there and try to put a whole nother twist or another mini plot or something like that in there, then you're going to lose.
Right.
You're going to lose the effect of the original.
Right. So you're either going to significantly lengthen your story so that you bring all those threads together again, or you go through and some of this editing is subtracting stuff out, knowing what to take out, and that comes. That's what the old statement of "kill your darlings" comes from. Yeah. It's like you've written this section that you're like really in love with, but it doesn't advance the plot. It doesn't really do anything. Right. It's just sitting there, or you've gone up on a political soapbox. But again, like I said, it's high praise indeed when somebody falls in love with your characters and your story and your plot and everything, and they go, "Wow, where's the rest of it? Give me more. I want more. Yeah, lengthen this. Do something with it."
Yeah, and again, it's a real fine line. Whether you leave them satisfied with a few questions, or totally, I hated it because it's never solved anything, or, so you have to be real careful what you add, what you subtract,
right. And as an author, you have to make sure that you answer, if not every single question. You should not have plot holes, and you should not leave the reader with 15 questions. Right. If they have one or two questions at the end, that's just
so anyway, so it was good to be here again this week.
It's very nice having you. Always.
Thank you, and you guys keep reading.
Yes, absolutely.
Remember, you can find all our stuff on the links below.
Yes, down below, a link to Terry's author page, and a link to mine as well. So, thank you very much.